How scarcity thinking is engineered. Most people believe scarcity is natural, that resources are limited, time is always running out, and competition is unavoidable. This belief feels sensible, even mature. But scarcity thinking is not simply a condition of the world. It is a design choice. And once installed, it quietly shapes how people work, how they spend, and how they comply, often against their own long-term interests. Scarcity begins in the mind, not in the environment. When people perceive scarcity, mental bandwidth narrows. Attention collapses around immediate problems. Long-term planning weakens. Judgment becomes distorted. This happens regardless of actual resources. People with stable incomes can feel permanently behind. Organizations with surplus can behave as if they are under threat. Entire societies can act as though collapse is always one step away. Once scarcity is felt, the brain shifts into survival mode. Short-term efficiency increases. People become sharper, faster, and more focused. But the cost is subtle. Long-term thinking degrades. Creativity declines. Moral reasoning becomes flexible. The mind becomes easier to steer because it is no longer asking broad questions. It is simply trying to cope. This is why scarcity is valuable to systems of power. A population under pressure is easier to manage than one that feels secure. Calm people think in decades. Scarce people think in days. Modern institutions rarely reward calm, long-range thought. They reward urgency, deadlines, and targets that reset before progress can compound. The feeling of almost enough is carefully maintained. Relief is delayed. Stability is made conditional. In workplaces, scarcity is framed as productivity. There is limited time, limited recognition, limited promotion, and limited security. People are encouraged to compete sideways with colleagues rather than question the incentives above them. Energy that could challenge structure is redirected into internal rivalry. In markets, scarcity is framed as opportunity. Limited supply and limited access push fear to replace evaluation. Speed replaces understanding. People are trained to react rather than reflect. In politics, scarcity is framed as threat. Not enough jobs, not enough housing, not enough safety. Attention shifts toward visible rivals instead of design choices. Complex problems are reduced to simple shortages, even when the issue is allocation. These systems do not rely on force. Scarcity thinking does the work for them. A mind under scarcity focuses downward, not outward. It monitors peers instead of incentives. It compares rather than questions. Power shifts quietly away from the individual, not through repression, but through distraction. People begin to blame themselves for structural outcomes. They internalize failure engineered by constraints they did not design. They work harder inside systems that quietly extract more than they return. They optimize behavior within rules they never agreed to. History repeats this pattern. Feudal hierarchies kept land scarce. Industrial labor kept wages scarce. Modern financial systems keep security scarce. In every case, scarcity is presented as natural and unavoidable. And in every case, it stabilizes existing power. When scarcity dominates perception, authority feels necessary. Rules feel protective. Inequality feels inevitable. Compliance begins to feel like responsibility. Scarcity thinking does not remove agency. It fragments it. Choices remain, but they are narrowed, rushed, and isolated. Collective imagination weakens. Long-term coordination becomes difficult. The future shrinks. At the same time, the world produces more than enough food, capital, and information. What remains scarce is access and control. Scarcity today is rarely about absolute limits. It is about filters, gates, and conditions. Scarcity narratives decide who waits, who qualifies, and who competes. They justify gatekeeping while appearing neutral. They convert systemic bottlenecks into personal responsibility. This is why scarcity thinking is difficult to escape. It is reinforced socially, professionally, and culturally. It is normalized as realism. Those who step outside it often appear naive or detached to those still inside it. The shift does not require denying limits. Real constraints exist. Time is finite. Trade-offs are unavoidable. The shift begins by distinguishing real limits from manufactured urgency and structural design from personal failure. Scarcity thinking is not a flaw in human nature. It is an operating condition imposed by design. When this becomes visible, urgency loosens its grip. Comparison loses its authority. Long-term thinking becomes possible again. Not because the world suddenly becomes abundant, but because your attention is no longer being rationed. Want to see the hidden rules shaping money, power, and human behavior? Subscribe to Unseen Forces.